The morning sun of Carrollton shone through a gap in the curtains, creating a golden streak on the bedroom floor. I opened my eyes and habitually reached to my right, fumbling for emptiness. 5 years had passed, and I still looked for Eleanor every morning. 73 years. My joints ached, reminding me of the decades that had passed and the thousands of tons of building materials that had passed through my hands. I, Norman Hollister, former owner of Hollister Construction, was now just an old man who was too slow to get out of bed. My gaze fell on the wooden-framed photograph on the bedside table. Eleanor and I holding newborn Pearl in our arms and 6-year-old Hugo, serious beyond his years, standing beside us with his hand on his mother's shoulder. "Good morning, Ellie," I whispered, as I had done every day since cancer had taken her. In the kitchen, I turned on the coffee maker, one of the few modern appliances I'd learned to use. The old house creaked and sighed around me, as lonely as its owner. 4 bedrooms, living room, dining room, study, too much space for one person. But I couldn't sell it. Too many memories in every corner. The phone rang as I poured coffee into a mug labeled, "To the best Grandpa," a gift from Walden and Iris last Christmas. "Hi, Dad." Hugo's voice sounded cheerful but tired. "How are you?" "I'm fine, son. Where are you now?" "Oklahoma. I'm taking a shipment of electronics to Dallas, passing through Carrollton day after tomorrow. Thought I'd stop by if you don't mind." "Of course it's okay." I've got life in my voice. "Bring Walden and Iris if they can." "Just me, Dad. They're in school, end of the year, but I'll tell them you miss them." After the conversation, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and an open newspaper. It was an old habit to read the paper press rather than the news on the internet, as Pearl had advised. "We're in the 21st century, Daddy," she often repeated with that intonation one saves for children and old people. Thinking about my youngest daughter brought a heavy sigh. We hadn't spoken in 2 weeks, not since she'd stopped by to tell me about the new house she and Quentin were going to buy. A luxury home in an upscale neighborhood for $1,800,000. "We don't have enough for a down payment," she said then, elegantly stirring her tea with the silver spoon that used to belong to her mother. Her gaze wandered around the room, avoiding my eyes. "The bank is demanding 30%. I knew what she was getting at, but I waited for a direct request, which never came. Instead, it was, "Quentin thinks we should look for something cheaper, but I can already see us in that house." She'd had this way of talking about problems, expecting me to suggest solutions since she was a teenager. Eleanor called it the Pearl signature style. "How much are you short?" I finally asked. $600,000, she said, still not looking at me. "We've already raised 400. The amount made me shudder inwardly, but I just nodded. "I'll help. We'll have the money by the end of the month." Only then she looked at me, not with gratitude but with a strange satisfaction, as if she'd gotten exactly what she'd hoped for. Then she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, leaving a trace of lipstick, and hurried off on her own. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my memories. Quentin Woodcourt, Pearl's husband, stood on the doorstep with a small folder in his hands and an embarrassed smile. "Good morning, Norman. Sorry for the early visit. I'm on my way to work." "Come in, Quentin." I stepped aside. "Coffee?" "I'd love some, if you don't mind." Unlike Pearl, her husband had always treated me with respect. Quentin was a civil engineer, and there was a professional understanding between us. We spoke the same language when it came to load-bearing structures, materials, and design. "I had some questions about the new project," he said as we sat down at the kitchen table with coffee. "Thought your expertise might be helpful." He opened a folder of drawings, a project to remodel an old warehouse into an office building. We spent the next hour discussing the technical details, and I felt needed, useful, as if my knowledge and experience were still worth something. "Thank you, Norman," Quentin said, folding up the drawings. "Your advice is invaluable. He hesitated. "I wanted to thank you for your help with the house. It's very generous of you." It's nothing, I said with a wave of my hand. You and Pearl are my family. Still, not every father is willing to help his children like that. His sincerity made me feel uncomfortable. What about Hugo? Quentin asked, changing the subject. I haven't seen him in a while. He's coming through town the day after tomorrow. He's bringing in supplies from Oklahoma. Give him my regards. He's a good man. When Quentin left, I sat at the table thinking about my children. Hugo and Pearl are so different, even though they grew up in the same house, with the same parents. Hugo has always been a hard worker. After school, he went to work on a building site, then trained as a driver. Now he travels all over the country hauling freight. Married Doreen, a nice, simple woman. 2 children, Walden, 16, is fond of computers, and Iris, 14, a talented artist. They live modestly, but decently. Hugo never asked me for money, even when Doreen lost her job during the pandemic. And Pearl, she always wanted more. Elite college, a degree in accounting, a job at a prestigious firm where she quickly rose through the ranks. Married Quentin when she was 32, late by Carrollton standards. They put off having children year after year. First her career, then traveling, then the house. Now, Pearl is 42, and talk of grandchildren on this side of the family has gradually died down. The mailman brought an envelope that knocked me out of my reverie, a glossy invitation with gold embossing. Global Accounting invites you to the annual Employee Award ceremony. At the bottom, a handwritten note. Dad, come if you can. Starts at 7 o'clock. Pearl. Not, I'd love to see you. Not, I hope you'll come. Just information. Nevertheless, I felt a surge of joy. Pearl wants me to attend an important event for her. Maybe all was not lost in our relationship. I called Hugo to tell him the news. The invitation is good, Dad, he said after a moment's pause. Just don't expect too much, okay? Hugo had always been perceptive. He'd seen how Pearl's attitude toward me had changed in recent years, especially since Eleanor's death. I'll be fine, son, I assured him. I just want to support your sister. I know, Dad. You've always been there for both of us. There was a warmth in his voice that was sorely lacking with Pearl. She used to look at me with admiration when I fixed her broken toys, when I taught her how to ride a bicycle, when I told her how to design a sturdy building. Now, all I saw in her eyes was condescension, like I was a burden, not a father. Later, I called Quentin to confirm the details of the event. Yes, I'll be there too, he confirmed. I can pick you up if you want. No need, Quentin, I can drive myself. I can still drive, you know, I tried to joke. I don't doubt your skills, Norman, he laughed. I just thought it would be more convenient. Thank you, but it's good for me to get out on my own. Otherwise, I'll be rusty. After the conversation, I went into the bedroom and opened the closet. I took out the dark blue suit I'd bought for Eleanor's funeral. I'd only worn it a few times at Pearl's wedding and Walden's high school graduation. The suit needed to be taken to the dry cleaners. My gaze fell on the shelf of ties. Eleanor always picked them out for me. She had impeccable taste. I thumbed through the silk strips, remembering what occasion each one had been bought for. Decided I needed a new one, a special one for this evening. In a dresser drawer, I found a velvet box. In it were the cufflinks Eleanor had given me for our 40th anniversary silver, with small sapphires. They match your eyes, she had said then. I decided to wear them to the ceremony. I spent the whole day worrying, taking my suit to the dry cleaners, buying a new tie at a store downtown, stopping by Joseph, the barber who'd cut my hair for the last 30 years. You going on a date, Norm? He joked as he worked the scissors around my thinning gray hair. For my daughter's award ceremony, I replied proudly. Ah, Pearl, how is she? Does she still look like her mother? Outwardly, yes, I said after a pause. But she's like me, stubborn. Joseph chuckled understandingly. Children. They grow up and forget where they came from. My Lizzie moved to New York 20 years ago. She calls it Christmas and Father's Day if she doesn't forget. I nodded, feeling oddly relieved that I wasn't the only one dealing with the alienation of children. Back at home, I sat down to rest in my chair. On the table beside me were bank receipts, evidence of my preparations for the transfer of $600,000 to Pearl and Quentin's account. The money was due in a week. I had mixed feelings. On the one hand, I wanted to help my daughter and son-in-law organize their lives. On the other hand, I had the feeling that Pearl took my help for granted. Unlike Quentin, who had repeatedly expressed his sincere gratitude. The phone rang and Pearl's name came up on the screen. I answered it with a smile. "Hi, daughter." "Daddy," her voice sounded businesslike. "Did you get the invitation?" "Yes, thank you. I'll definitely come." "Oh, good. Listen, there's going to be a lot of important people from the company there. Please don't tell your stories about the old days in construction, okay?" There was concern in her voice, bordering on irritation. I felt like I'd been kicked in the butt. I understand," I said. "Don't worry." "Also," she continued, not noticing the change in my voice, "wear something decent. That gray suit, for example, it's not so old-fashioned." "I have a blue suit," I said quietly. "I've already taken it to the dry cleaners." "Okay." She was clearly in a hurry to finish talking. "I have to run to the meeting. I'll see you at the ceremony." She hung up without waiting for my response. I sat there for a long time staring at the extinguished phone screen. When did my little girl turn into this cold, calculating woman? What had I done wrong? In the evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I looked at the picture of our family again. Ellie, I thought, you would know just what to say to her. You always found the right words. Eleanor was the link between me and the kids, especially with Pearl. She smoothed our conflicts, translated my clumsy attempts to express love into a language my daughter could understand. Without her, it was as if we were speaking different languages. Outside the window, it began to rain. Soft, spring rain. The sound of drops on the roof brought back memories of the evenings when Eleanor and I sat on the veranda, watching the children play in the yard. Hugo was building forts out of sticks and twigs, and Pearl, a very young girl, was helping him with a serious look, carrying small twigs. The rain was getting heavier, and I closed my eyes, letting its monotonous noise carry me to sleep. Tomorrow would be a big day. I will be by my daughter's side in her moment of triumph. Maybe this will be the beginning of something new between us. Maybe she'll see me as a father again, not just an old man living out his days. The Marriott Hotel greeted me with a gleaming marble lobby and an obliging doorman who accepted the keys to my old Buick. In a blue suit with a new tie and shine shoes, I felt quite confident even though most of the guests were much younger than me. The awards ceremony was held in a large banquet hall on the second floor. There were waiters with trays of champagne everywhere and a table with appetizers at the far wall. Live music provided a pleasant background for the soft conversations of the gathered people in business suits and evening gowns. I was looking around, trying to find Pearl or Quentin, when I heard a familiar voice. "Daddy, you made it." Pearl looked stunning in a dark green dress that emphasized her slim figure. Her hair was elegantly coiffed, and the pearl earrings, Eleanor's gift to her on her 30th birthday, set off her neck beautifully. "Of course you did," I smiled. "How could I miss such an important event?" She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, but I could see some concern in her eyes. She looked me over from head to toe, as if checking to see if I looked all right. "You look good," she said with slight surprise. "Is that tie new?" "I bought it especially for tonight." "Nice," she took my arm. "Come on, I'll introduce you to some of my colleagues." The next half hour was spent in introductions and small talk. Pearl introduced me to people I would probably never see again. Vice presidents, department heads, senior partners, all with perfect smiles and firm handshakes. "This is my father, Norman Hollister," she introduced me. He's, used to own a construction company. The way she said, back in the day, as if to emphasize that my accomplishments were far behind me, made me cringe inwardly. But I kept my smile and shook another hand. Quentin joined us as we chatted with a burly man named Roger Bennington, Pearl's immediate superior. "Ah, there's the son-in-law," Roger exclaimed, clapping Quentin on the shoulder. "Your wife is the star of the evening tonight, lad. Her financial strategies have saved the company millions." "I always knew she was special," Quentin replied, putting his arm around Pearl's waist. "Norman, good to see you." He shook my hand. "How did you get here?" "Fine, thank you. Wonderful event." "So this is your father-in-law, Quentin?" Roger asked, eyeing me with an appraising look. "Yes," Quentin answered with genuine warmth in his voice, "and one of the best builders I know. His structural advice still helps me out on difficult projects." I felt a surge of gratitude toward my son-in-law. He was the only one who mentioned my professional experience as something valuable, not obsolete. Pearl frowned slightly but remained silent. Her attention was drawn to a woman in a strict black suit who was making signs to her from across the hall. "I need to talk to Helen," she said. "Quentin, show Daddy where he can get something to eat." And she left without waiting for an answer. "Come on, Norman," Quentin said. "I'm hungry myself." At the appetizer table, we filled our plates and found a vacant table in the corner of the room. Quentin talked about his new project. I shared my experience with difficult soils. For a brief moment, I felt like a full human being, not just Father Pearl. The evening continued. The formal speeches began, and Quentin and I took seats closer to the stage. Pearl sat at a separate table with the other employees being honored. When it was Pearl's turn, I felt a surge of pride. She stepped up gracefully, confidently, accepted the crystal statuette from the hands of the gray-haired chairman of the board, and gave a brief but emotional speech about teamwork and dedication to the company. "I would like to thank my family for their support," she concluded, "especially my husband Quentin, who has always believed in me. Not a word about me or my mother. It was as if Eleanor and I had had nothing to do with her becoming a mother." I felt a prick of resentment but tried not to show it. After all, this was her moment of triumph. After the ceremony, the informal part of the evening began. The music was louder. The waiters were more active in serving drinks. Pearl roamed from group to group, accepting congratulations and conducting business conversations. From time to time, she came back to Quentin and me, but not for long. She was constantly distracted by her colleagues. At one of these moments, a woman who introduced herself as Amanda approached us with a martini glass in her hand. "You must be Pearl's father," she said, giving me an appraising look. "She talks about you a lot." "She does?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "Oh, yes." Amanda took a sip. "She says you're a, colorful personality." Something in her tone made me wary. I glanced at Quentin, who grimaced slightly. "Amanda works in the marketing department," he said quickly. She and Pearl had collaborated on several projects. "Oh, more than a few," Amanda laughed. "Pearl and I are very close. She even confides her family stories to me." I was beginning to feel uncomfortable. Quentin, noticing this, tried to shift the conversation. "How's the campaign for Western Union going?" But Amanda wouldn't budge. "You know, Mr. Hollister, Pearl said you weren't very good with modern technology," she said with feigned sympathy. "How are you coping in our digital world?" "Quite well," I answered with restraint. "I've mastered everything I need to know." "That's nice." Amanda smiled as if I were a child showing off my shoelace tying skills. At that moment, Pearl returned holding a glass of champagne. "What are you two talking about?" she asked. "I was just telling your father what a wonderful daughter you are," Amanda said with the same fake smile. "Taking care of him despite your busyness." Pearl tensed, but quickly pulled herself together. "Daddy can manage on his own, can't you, Daddy?" She turned to me. "He's independent. Trying not to be a burden, I replied, trying to make it sound like a joke. Oh, come on, Pearl waved her hand. You're not a burden. It's just that sometimes. Demand attention. There was an awkward pause. Amanda looked from me to Pearl, clearly enjoying the situation. Pearl, Quentin intervened. I think Marcus is looking for you. He's standing by the stage with some seemingly important man. Really? Pearl perked up. It could be a representative of Axiom Invest. Excuse me, I have to go. She left quickly. Amanda, having lost interest in the conversation without Pearl, soon followed her. Don't mind Amanda, Quentin said when we were alone. She likes to dramatize. But not making things up, I remarked. Is that really what Pearl says about me? Quentin hesitated, which was answer enough. Norman, you know I respect you, he said at last, and I appreciate everything you do for us. She's going through a rough patch. The pressure at work, the stress of buying a house. I nodded, appreciating his attempt to smooth things over, but the bitterness remained. Pearl returned half an hour later, lively and a little disheveled. It really was the Axiom man, she exclaimed. They're considering me for the position of chief financial officer in their subsidiary, with a double salary. That's wonderful, dear, Quentin hugged her. Congratulations. Good for you, I added. You've always been determined. We should celebrate that. Pearl looked around. Where are the waiters with the champagne? A waiter was just passing nearby, but in a different direction. Dad, Pearl turned to me, could you get us some champagne and some appetizers? These tempura shrimp are divine. I was confused for a moment. Was she asking me to be the waiter? Pearl, Quentin frowned. Your father is a guest, not a caterer. Come on, she waved him away. Daddy doesn't mind doing a little favor on my special night, do you, Daddy? I met her gaze and saw a strange expression in her eyes, a mixture of defiance and superiority. She was testing the boundaries, and we both knew it. Of course, I said, getting up. I'll be right back. Making my way to the appetizer table, I felt humiliated. Did she really see me as a servant? I filled my plate with shrimp and took 3 glasses of champagne from the tray of a passing waiter. When I returned, Pearl was talking to an elegant, middle-aged couple. Quentin stood nearby with a tense expression on his face. There's my father, Pearl said when she saw me. I sent him to get the drinks. The couple smiled politely, but surprise flashed in their eyes. I set the plate and glasses on the nearest table. Michael and Julia Atwood, Pearl introduced the couple. Michael is the senior partner. I shook their hands, feeling increasingly awkward. Dad, Pearl continued, did you only bring 1 plate of appetizers? I thought you would have guessed what was needed for everyone. Pearl, Quentin's voice sounded warning. What? She looked at her husband defiantly. I'm just asking for more appetizers. Is it that difficult? I'll go, I said, trying to maintain my dignity. And more ice, Pearl shouted after me. I moved slower this time. The old arthritis in my knees was making itself felt after standing for so long. When I returned with a new batch of appetizers, Pearl looked irritably at her watch. What's taking so long? The Atwoods had already left. Sorry, I said. There's a line forming. Or you just move like a turtle, she muttered, but loud enough for me to hear. Quentin turned to her sharply. Pearl, this is out of line. What boundaries? She shrugged. I'm just stating a fact. Papa's really slow. It's not his fault. Age takes its toll. I felt the blood rush to my face, not from the physical effort, but from the humiliation. Maybe I should sit down, I said, trying to keep my composure. Sure. Pearl waved her hand toward the far tables. Get some rest. At your age, you need to conserve your strength. Quentin took her elbow. Pearl, we need to talk. Now. About what? She made an innocent face. In private, Quentin insisted, and I could hear a steel in his voice that I hadn't noticed before. They stepped aside. I watched Quentin say something heatedly, and Pearl waved it off, then began to argue, her face red with anger. Finally, she turned and walked away, and Quentin stood there, clenching his fists. I found an empty seat and sat down, feeling squeezed like a lemon. Was this really how my daughter felt about me? Like a burden, like an unwanted old man. Quentin came over and sat down next to me. "Norman, I want to apologize for Pearl's behavior," he said. "It's inexcusable." "It's all right," I lied. "Maybe she's just overexcited about the award and possible promotion." "No," Quentin shook his head. "That's no excuse. I've never—" He paused, searching for words. "I've never seen her so cruel." There was genuine shock in his eyes, as if he saw something new in his wife, something disturbing. "She wasn't always like this," I said quietly. "She was once a kind, caring girl." "I know," Quentin put his hand on my shoulder. "And I don't understand what happened, but the way she's treating you, it's unacceptable." We sat in silence. The music and laughter around us seemed fake now, out of place. Pearl returned 20 minutes later, flushed and with glistening eyes. It looked like she'd had more champagne. "There you are," she said with a strained smile. "I've been looking all over for you." "We haven't gone anywhere," Quentin replied coldly. "Never mind," she waved her hand. "Daddy, could you get me another glass of champagne? I'm celebrating." Quentin opened his mouth to object, but I raised my hand, stopping him. "I think you've had enough, Pearl," I said calmly. Her face contorted with anger. "You're telling me how much to drink? At my own party?" "I'm just looking out for you," I replied. "Oh, of course," she laughed, but there was no mirth in her laugh. "You care now. Where was that caring when I really needed your support? When you were lost on your construction sites while my mom raised us practically alone?" Those words hit me like a slap in the face. Unfair, cruel words. "Pearl," Quentin intervened, "you're out of line." "No," she turned to him. "You don't understand. He's always been like this. All about his work, his projects. And now that he's a useless old man, he expects us to babysit him." "Pearl!" Quentin sounded really angry, but she didn't stop. "You know, Daddy, maybe you should think about a nursing home. They'd take care of you there. People like you don't belong at a decent event." There was a deafening silence. I saw Quentin's face turn pale with shock. A few people around us fell silent, listening to our conversation. "I think I should go," I said, rising. "Yes, I suppose you should," Pearl agreed with unconcealed relief. "You should get some rest." Quentin grabbed her arm. "Apologize to your father right now." "For what? For the truth." She wrenched her hand away. "He knows I'm right. We'll talk about this at home," Quentin said icily and turned to me. "Norman, let me walk you out." "There's no need," I tried to smile. "I'll find my way." "I insist," Quentin was adamant. Pearl snorted. "Of course. Go babysit him. As always." Quentin threw her a look of such deep disappointment that even Pearl was quiet for a moment. He took me under his arm and led me toward the exit, ignoring the curious stares of the others. In the elevator, he broke the silence. "Norman, I don't know what to say. I've never seen Pearl so. I can't even find the words." "It's all right, Quentin," I patted him on the shoulder. "Sometimes people say things they don't mean." "No," he shook his head, and I saw something new in his eyes, an epiphany and horror at the same time. "I'm afraid that's exactly what she meant. And it makes me wonder, who is she really? How could I not have noticed it before?" We stepped outside. The cool evening air cleared my head a little. The doorman called my car. "Are you sure you can drive?" Quentin asked with concern. "I can drive you home." "I'm fine," I assured him. "Go back to Pearl. She's your wife, and today is her holiday no matter what." "After what she said?" He shook his head. "I'm not sure I can talk to her right now." My Buick pulled up. Before I got behind the wheel, I turned to my son-in-law. "Quentin, don't let what happened today ruin your relationship. I'll get over it." He looked at me with a long look. "It's not just about you, Norman. It's that I saw a side of Pearl today that I hadn't seen before, and it's making me rethink a lot of things. I saw in his eyes the real pain and confusion of a man whose picture of the world was suddenly shaken. The night drive home was a blur. I drove on autopilot, mechanically turning the steering wheel and pushing the pedals as my thoughts swirled around in my head. The streetlights blurred before my eyes, not from crying. No, I wasn't crying. More from the numbness that comes after a hard hit. The house greeted me with the familiar silence and darkness. I flicked the light switch in the hallway, threw my keys on the table, and walked into the living room without undressing. I collapsed into my old armchair, unable even to take off my coat. Old people like you should be in a nursing home, not at a decent function. Pearl's words echoed in my head. It wasn't so much the words themselves that hurt. I wasn't so naive that I didn't know that many people thought that way about older people. What hurt was that they were spoken by my daughter, my flesh and blood. The girl I once rocked in my arms, the girl I read bedtime stories to, the girl I built a treehouse with my own hands. I looked at my hands, wrinkled with protruding veins and age spots, hands that had built a business from the ground up, the hands that held Pearl's little palm as she took her first steps. When did everything change? When did her eyes that looked at me with adoration become filled with contempt? My gaze fell on the family photo on the mantelpiece. Pearl is about 10 years old with 2 pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, her front teeth just beginning to change to permanent ones. She sits on my shoulders, holding my head, pure delight on her face. We're at a construction site, and I'm showing her how to erect a building I designed myself. "Daddy, when I grow up, I'm going to build houses higher than the clouds," she said then. "You can do anything you want, princess," I replied. And she did. She succeeded. She rose up the ladder. Only somewhere along the way she lost something important. I sighed heavily and finally took off my coat. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Alcohol would dull the pain, but I hadn't had a strong drink in a long time. My heart wasn't right anymore. Another episode came to mind about 15 years ago. Pearl had just graduated from college, got her first serious job. Eleanor and I took her out to dinner to celebrate. She showed up an hour late, irritable and distant. She barely listened to anything we said, kept checking her phone. "Honey, what's wrong?" Eleanor asked then. "Nothing, Mom," Pearl replied. "It's just that I'm an adult now. I've got a lot to do. It's not all about family dinners." Eleanor turned pale but didn't say anything. And I didn't say anything. I didn't want to ruin the evening with a fight. Maybe I should have talked to her then. Explain what it means to respect your parents. But I've always avoided confrontation. "Let there be peace," Eleanor's favorite phrase, became my motto. Perhaps too often I had yielded to keep that peace. I walked to the bedroom, slowly removed my suit, hung it carefully in the closet. I undid my cufflinks, sapphire cufflinks, a gift from Eleanor. He put them away in a velvet box. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the evening in my head, every word, every look. And not just tonight all the times I'd noticed changes in Pearl, but preferred not to pay attention to them. I remembered Christmas 2 years ago. Hugo had arrived with his family, the house filled with laughter and holiday bustle. Pearl and Quentin were the last to arrive, 3 hours late. She barely kissed me on the cheek, quickly handed me a gift, an expensive but faceless scarf, and spent most of the evening talking on the phone with co-workers. When Walden asked her to help me put together a new building kit, she said, "Ask Grandpa. He's got nothing better to do." She and I used to spend hours building model airplanes and ships, or last Father's Day. Hugo had arrived first thing in the morning with a homemade cake and a card Iris had drawn. Pearl sent a text saying, "Happy Father's Day." She didn't even call. And yet, I kept making excuses for her. Busy work, stress, maybe marriage problems. Always finding a reason why my little girl had become so cold and distant. Sometime around morning, I finally fell into a restless sleep. I woke up to the doorbell ringing. The clock read 10 a.m. I had slept longer than usual. I threw on my robe and went to open the door. Quentin stood on the doorstep with a bag from the bakery. "Good morning, Norman," he said. He had a look of concern in his eyes. "I hope I didn't wake you." No, I'm up," I lied. "Come in." We went into the kitchen. Quentin took croissants out of the bag and put the kettle on. "How are you?" he asked, looking at me with genuine concern. "I've been better," I tried to smile. "And you? How was the rest of the evening?" Quentin sighed heavily and sat down across from me at the kitchen table. "Honestly? Terrible. Pearl and I had a big fight." "Because of me?" I felt a pang of guilt. "No, Norman," Quentin shook his head. "Not because of you. It was her behavior, the way she treated you. It's unforgivable." He stopped talking as the kettle boiled. He stood up, made tea, poured it into cups. His movements were precise but tense, as if he were holding back emotion. "Norman, I've come to apologize," he said at last, sitting down again. "For Pearl and for myself. I should have intervened sooner, stopped her." "You tried," I objected. "I saw. Not enough." He clenched his fists. "I'd turned a blind eye to her. Changes for too long. I thought it was temporary because of the stress of work. But yesterday I saw something that made me really think about it." Quentin was silent, gathering his thoughts. I didn't rush him, sipping the hot tea in small gulps. "This isn't the first time Pearl has acted like this," he continued. "But before, it was little things that could be blamed on fatigue or bad moods. Sharpness with waiters, rudeness with cab drivers, a condescending tone with junior colleagues." He was silent again, as if hesitant to continue. "Last month we visited my parents," he said quietly. "They live in a small town in Oklahoma, simple people. My dad's a lifelong oil refinery worker, and my mom's a school teacher." I nodded, remembering that I'd met them at a wedding a nice couple, humble and friendly. "Mom made dinner," Quentin continued. "Not gourmet, of course, but her specialty, tuna casserole and apple pie for dessert. Pearl barely touched the food, and then, as we were on our way to the hotel, she said—" He swallowed. "She said she wasn't going to those rednecks anymore and that my mother couldn't cook." I shuddered, imagining how painful it was for him to hear that. "I reprimanded her and we had a fight," Quentin continued. "But then she apologized, said she was tired from the road, and I forgave her. I wanted to believe it wasn't serious." He picked up the croissant but only mechanically nibbled at it, not bringing it to his mouth. "And 2 weeks ago there was a corporate party at her company. One of the new hires, a guy from accounting, had gotten some numbers mixed up in a presentation. Pearl gave him such a hard time in front of everyone. The guy almost cried. And then when I told her it was cruel, she laughed and called me too soft." Quentin looked up at me. "But yesterday, the way she spoke to you, that was the last straw. It was like I saw for the first time what she had become, and it scared me, Norman, because I don't recognize the woman I married." There was such pain in his voice that I involuntarily reached out and squeezed his shoulder. "Quentin, people change," I said softly. "Perhaps Pearl is going through some kind of difficult period." "No," he shook his head. "I've been convincing myself of that for a long time. But the truth is, she's not changing, she's revealing herself. What she used to hide is coming out, and I'm afraid," he stammered, "I'm afraid I can't be with someone like that." The words hung in the air. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to protect Pearl, to make excuses. But the other part of me knew Quentin was right. "I love Pearl," he continued. "Or loved the Pearl I knew. Smart, ambitious, but also caring and kind. Now all I see is ambition. It's like everything else is burned out in her." He finally looked at me directly. "How long have you been noticing these changes, Norman?" I wondered. "When did it start?" "Gradually, almost imperceptibly." Individual episodes that I wrote off as coincidences. Probably after Eleanor's death, I answered honestly. She was a deterrent to all of us, especially for Pearl. They were very close, but Eleanor was also able to gently guide her daughter when she started to lose her way. 5 years, Quentin shook his head. And all that time you put up with her attitude? She's my daughter, I shrugged as if that explained everything. But that doesn't give her the right to treat you like that. There was indignation in his voice. You deserve respect, Norman, especially from your own children. We were silent. The birds were singing outside the window and the spring sun was shining through the curtains, an ordinary day that somehow seemed to be at a turning point. What are you going to do? I finally asked. Quentin stared at his cup for a long time as if searching the bottom for an answer. I don't know, he said quietly. I have a lot to think about, but I slept in the guest bedroom last night, and I left this morning before she woke up. He looked up at me. And you, Norman, what are you going to do with the money for the house? I shuddered. In the turmoil of last night, I had almost forgotten about the $600,000 I had promised Pearl and Quentin. Yeah, haven't decided yet, I answered. I'll understand if you change your mind, Quentin said. After yesterday, no one would have judged you. He got up, walked through the kitchen, stopped at the window. You know, Norman, I've always admired you, he said, looking out at my neat backyard. The way you've built a business from the ground up, the way you treat people, with respect no matter what their position. You've taught me a lot professionally, but even more as a human being. He turned to me. I want you to know that no matter what happens between Pearl and me, I will always consider you my family. These words touched me to the core. Strangely, my son-in-law understood and appreciated me more than my own daughter. When Quentin left, I stayed in the kitchen, immersed in thought. The events of the last 24 hours had turned my world upside down. I felt both devastated and strangely liberated, as if I'd finally seen a truth I'd long refused to acknowledge. Pearl had changed, or, as Quentin said, revealed. And this new Pearl had no love or respect for me. I picked up my phone and opened the banking app. The screen displayed my account with an impressive amount of money. I planned to transfer some of this money, $600,000, to Pearl to buy a house. The transfer was already prepared. All that was left was to press the confirm button on the appointed day, in a week's time. My finger hovered over the screen. What am I supposed to do? Keep my promise despite what happened yesterday? Or finally set boundaries? Pearl's words came to mind. Old people like you should be in a nursing home. And then, he's always been like that. All work, all his projects. I remembered skipping lunches and dinners to finish projects on time, how he'd come home late when the kids were already asleep. But I also remembered weekends devoted entirely to family, going to the park, helping with homework, building a treehouse. I wasn't a perfect father, but I tried. And the money I made disappearing on construction sites provided Pearl with a prestigious college education and a carefree youth. I opened another app and typed a message to Hugo. Son, can you come over today? Need to talk. The reply came a minute later. Sure, Dad. I'll be there for lunch. I smiled. Hugo had always been reliable. Not as brilliant and ambitious as Pearl, but loyal and loving. He never asked me for money, even when things were tight. Pride wouldn't allow it. But I knew that the education of his children, Walden and Iris, was a constant concern for him. He saved every extra dollar for college for them, denying himself many things. I looked at the bank app again. $600,000. A sum that could change the lives of not only Pearl, but Hugo and his family. To educate their grandchildren, to buy a bigger house to replace their cramped apartment, to give Doreen the chance to finally open the little atelier she dreamed of. The solution came surprisingly easily. I clicked cancel for the planned Pearl transfer. Then I created a new one in Hugo's name, same amount. But I didn't send it right away. I wanted to talk to my son in person first. When I put the phone away, I was relieved. For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing the right thing, not just trying to buy the love of a daughter who had long ago stopped respecting me. I went to take a shower, then got dressed and got to work cleaning the house. Hugo will be here for dinner. I need to make something tasty. Maybe his favorite lasagna from Eleanor's recipe. As I worked in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and preparing the sauce, I thought about last night, about the conversation with Quentin, about the upcoming conversation with Hugo, about the money that would no longer go to Pearl. Strangely enough, I felt no gloating or even much bitterness, just a quiet confidence that I was doing the right thing, and the hope that maybe this would teach Pearl a lesson. Not a vindictive, get-what-you-deserve lesson, but rather a reminder that actions have consequences, that respect must be earned, and that even blood ties don't entitle you to be disrespected. Maybe someday my daughter will realize that, and if not, well, I've done my best to raise her to be a decent human being. It's her choice from here on out. I put the lasagna in the oven and looked at the clock. Hugo was still 2 hours away. Enough time to prepare for a conversation that could change the future of our family. I realized that the phrase, "I imagined this scene," is not appropriate for a first-person narrative in this context. It creates a contradiction because Norman could not directly observe Pearl's meeting with the realtor. Let's rewrite the chapter with this correction in mind. That morning I was tending to the rose bushes in the garden, a hobby I had picked up from Eleanor. The day was clear and warm, the first real summer weekend. After my conversation with Hugo yesterday, I felt lighthearted, despite the storm ahead. I knew that now, at 10 in the morning, Pearl was supposed to be meeting with the realtor to finalize the deal on the house. She had mentioned it several times, emphasizing the importance of the moment. How much pride was in her voice when she talked about our new house in Lakeside, as if it was proof of her success in life. I wonder how the meeting is going. Surely Pearl is sitting there, confident and elegant, discussing details with realtor Martha Jenkins, a name I remembered from our previous conversations. The paperwork is ready, the sellers are in agreement. All that's left is to wire the money Pearl expects to receive from me, the money that won't come. I pruned the wilted buds, gathering them into a small basket. My hands moved mechanically, doing their usual work while my thoughts wandered around the events of the last few days. Hugo arrived yesterday at lunchtime, as promised. We sat on the veranda, ate lasagna, and talked about his work, his children, his plans for the future. I took my time with the main topic, enjoying the simple human interaction with my son. Walden got provisional admission to the Georgia Institute of Technology, Hugo said proudly. His robotics project impressed the admissions committee. That's great! I was truly happy for my grandson. He's always been a bright boy. Yes, but the cost of tuition. Hugo was silent, frowning. Doreen and I are saving every dime we can, but I'm afraid we'll have to take out a student loan. It was perfect timing. Hugo, I want to make you an offer, I began. You know that I was going to help Pearl and Quentin buy a house. He nodded, looking at me carefully. After what happened at the corporate party, I paused, choosing my words. I decided not to give them the money. Hugo looked surprised. Dad, I'm sure Pearl didn't mean to hurt you. Maybe we should talk to her. Typical Hugo, always looking for a peaceful solution, always willing to give others a second chance, even when they don't deserve it. It's not just the corporate thing, son, I replied. Her attitude toward me had been changing for years. I just finally decided to stop putting up with it. I told him about the conversation with Quentin, about the way Pearl treated other people, about her contemptuous attitude toward her husband's parents. I don't recognize my sister, Hugo shook his head. Where's that funny girl we used to build pillow forts with? Grown up, I sighed. Changed, or as Quentin said, opened up. We were silent for a moment, then I continued. The $600,000 I was going to give Pearl, I want to offer it to you." Hugo looked up sharply, his eyes widening in surprise. "What?" "No, Dad. I can't accept it." "Why not?" I asked. "You're my son. You deserve my help as much as Pearl does." "That's not the point," he shook his head. "I don't want to be the cause of your quarrel. If Pearl finds out that you gave me the money you promised her, it's my money, Hugo," I said firmly, "and I decide who I give it to. Pearl didn't deserve my help with her attitude. And you've never asked, though I know it's not always easy for you." Hugo lowered his eyes. His pride struggled with practicality. "Think of Walden and Iris," I continued. "That money could pay for their education. You could buy a bigger house so the kids could have their own rooms. Doreen could open that atelier she dreams of." Hugo was silent for a long time, then said quietly, "Dad, I've always tried to do things on my own. I didn't want to be a burden." "You were never a burden, son." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You were a pillar, especially after Mom died." Tears glistened in his eyes. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "I'll talk to Doreen. It's a big decision." We talked for a long time, about the children, about work, about the future. We talked about Pearl too, sadly, but without anger. Hugo defended his sister to the last, made excuses for her behavior. It was so like him to see the good in people, even when they didn't deserve it. When he left, I gave him a big hug. "Thanks for coming, son." "Always, Dad," he replied. "I'll call you tonight, okay?" Now, pruning roses in the morning sun, I thought about our conversation, about how differently my children's fates had turned out. Hugo is simple, honest, hard-working. Pearl, ambitious, successful, but who lost something important on the way to her success. The phone in my shirt pocket vibrated. I pulled it out. Pearl's name popped up on the screen. I didn't answer, put the phone down on the garden table, and continued working on the roses. A minute later, the phone vibrated again, and again. Then came the message, "Dad, call me back urgently." I could imagine what was going on in the realtor's office. Pearl, sure everything was going according to plan, suddenly finds out there's no money in the account. Panic, confusion, anger, calls to the bank demanding an explanation, and finally calls to me. The phone was ringing off the hook. Calls, messages, more calls. I didn't answer, not out of vindictiveness. I just wasn't ready for this conversation. Not now, not on the phone. By noon, the vibrations became so frequent that I turned the phone off altogether. Finished with the roses, I went into the house, showered and changed. There were leftovers from last night's lasagna in the fridge, the perfect lunch. I had just sat down at the table when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I saw Hugo, sooner than I expected. "Dad," he said, coming in, "did you talk to Pearl?" "No." I shook my head. "She called, but I didn't answer." "She called me too." Hugo looked worried, yelling into the phone, accusing me of turning you against her. Said you were the reason the deal on the house fell through. I sighed. "Sit down, son. You want lasagna?" We sat down at the kitchen table. Hugo tapped his fingers nervously on the countertop. "Dad, she's furious. She says she's already signed some of the papers, put down a deposit, and now she's going to lose it." "It's her choice," I said calmly. "I didn't promise to wire the money until the end of the month. She was in a hurry." Hugo shook his head. "She claims you promised to make the transfer by today." "That's not true." I looked my son in the eye. I clearly said the end of the month. She knew that. We were silent for a moment. Then Hugo spoke again, quietly and seriously. "Doreen and I discussed your proposal. She was against it at first. Pride, like me. But then—" He smiled weakly. "Then she imagined how Walden and Iris could get an education without debt, how we'd be able to buy a house where we could each have our own room." He looked up at me. "If the offer still stands, we accept it. With gratitude." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "Of course it's still on the table, son. But I want you to know that this isn't about money, Hugo said seriously. I could do it myself if I had to, but your help, it's like a blessing. It's like you're saying, I believe in you, in your future. I nodded, touched by his words. That's exactly what I'm saying, Hugo. I believe in you, in Doreen, in the children. You deserve that support. We discussed the practical details. I insisted that some of the money go toward Walden and Iris's education, some toward buying a new house, and the rest toward an atelier for Doreen. Hugo agreed, though he still looked a little stunned. I can't believe this is happening, he said when I finished the transfer through the banking app. It's like winning the lottery, only better. You deserve it, son, I replied. Your love, your respect, the way you raise your kids. The phone on the table came to life and I turned it on again. Notifications of missed calls and messages popped up, mostly from Pearl. But there was one from Quentin. Norman, we need to talk. Can I come over? I replied, sure, and put the phone away. Hugo noticed this and frowned. Pearl won't settle down, Dad. You know her temper. I do. I nodded. But I'm not going to indulge her whims anymore. It's time she learned that respect must be earned. Hugo left around 3 in the afternoon, still overcome with emotion from the unexpected turn of events. I promised to join them for dinner that weekend, to meet Walden's new projects and see Iris's latest drawings. Shortly after he left, Quentin arrived. He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, a wrinkled shirt, stubble on his usually smooth-shaven face. Norman, he said as he entered, I take it you haven't returned Pearl's calls. No, I shook my head. I thought it would be better to have this conversation in person. She was hysterical. Quentin sank tiredly into a chair in the living room, screaming, throwing things, blaming everyone around her. The realtor was in shock, had to apologize to her and the sellers. I'm sorry you had to go through that, I said sincerely. It's not just about today. Quentin shook his head. After the corporate party, we had a huge fight. I told her everything I thought about her behavior with you. She got defensive at first, then blamed you, then me. I ended up going to bed in the guest room. He paused to collect his thoughts. And then today, when the deal fell through, that was the last straw. It wasn't the money itself. It's your right to decide what you want to do with it. It was the way she reacted, all about herself, her humiliation, how you let her down, not a word about how it was probably her own fault. Quentin looked up at me. Norman, I've made a decision. I'm filing for divorce. Those words hung in the air. I wasn't completely surprised after our conversation last night, but still, it was serious. Are you sure? I asked quietly. Maybe we should try couples therapy? I suggested it, he grinned bitterly. A month ago, when I noticed how our relationship was changing, she called it wussy whining and refused. He ran a hand through his hair, ruffling it even more. It's not just about the money or the house, Norman. It's not even about how she treats you or my parents. It's that I don't recognize the woman I married. I'm sorry, Quentin, I said. And it was the truth. I was sorry that my daughter's marriage was falling apart, sorry that she'd lost a good man like Quentin, and most of all sorry that she herself was the cause of it all. I've already contacted a lawyer, Quentin continued. I've packed up some of my things and moved into a hotel. I wanted you to hear it from me, not from Pearl. Thank you, I nodded. What are you going to do next? I don't know yet, he shrugged. Maybe I'll take a vacation, visit my parents in Oklahoma. Take some time to think about it. We talked some more, about work, about his plans, about how hard it was to start over at 36. Quentin was depressed but determined. Before he left, he said, Norman, I want you to know that no matter what, I consider you my family, and I hope we can keep in touch. Of course, I shook his hand. You'll always be welcome in this house. When the door closed behind Quentin, I went back into the living room and sat in a chair, thinking about the vicissitudes of life. One day, and so many changes. The money that was supposed to go towards a house for Pearl would now help Hugo and his family. Pearl and Quentin's marriage, which had seemed so solid, was crumbling. And I, the old man whom my daughter considered a burden, had finally found the strength to set boundaries. The phone vibrated again. This time I glanced at the screen. It was Pearl again. I almost answered, but then changed my mind. This conversation would be better conducted face to face, and I was sure I wouldn't have to wait long. Indeed, not an hour later I heard the squeal of brakes in the yard. The car door slammed so hard that the windows shuddered. Furious footsteps on the path, and then the door is no longer ringing but pounding. Pearl had come for an explanation, and this time I was ready to give them. The pounding on the door was so fierce that it seemed as if it were about to fly off its hinges. I took my time, rose slowly from my chair, and walked across the living room. The noise continued, now the shrill ringing of the doorbell, which Pearl was holding down without letting go, had been added to the knocking. I opened the door and saw my daughter, flushed, with disheveled hair and fury in her eyes. Her usually flawless makeup was smeared as if she'd been crying or rubbing her face in anger. "How could you?" were her first words thrown in my face as she burst into the hallway without waiting for an invitation. I quietly closed the door and turned to her. "Hello, Pearl." "Don't you dare hello me," she was almost shouting. "You set me up. You promised that money. I lost the deposit. I looked like a complete idiot in front of the realtor and the sellers." I walked past her into the living room, making it clear I wasn't going to talk in the hallway. She followed me without stopping her tirade. "Do you realize what you've done? Quentin and I signed the papers. Now we're facing a lawsuit, all because a senile old man decided to take offense." I sat down in my chair and gestured for her to sit across from me. She ignored it, continuing to stand in the middle of the room, clenching and unclenching her fists. "Are you done?" I asked calmly when she paused to catch her breath. "No, I'm not done." She raised her voice again. "I demand an explanation. Why didn't you transfer the money? Why didn't you answer the phone? Do you have any idea what I've been through today?" "Sit down, Pearl," I said in the same calm tone of voice. "I'll explain everything." Something in my voice, perhaps an unaccustomed firmness, made her listen. She sank to the edge of the couch, still seething with resentment. "I didn't wire the money because I didn't think you deserved it," I said bluntly, looking her in the eye. She blinked, clearly not expecting that bluntness. "What?" "After the way you treated me at the corporate party, after all those years of you slowly losing respect for me, I've decided it's time to stop putting up with it." "You mean that night?" She shook her head incredulously. "Really? You're depriving us of our home because of one bad night?" "Not because of one night, Pearl, because it showed what you've become." I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, but she got over it quickly. "I was on edge," she said, coming to my defense. "The stress of work, the excitement of the awards. I didn't mean to offend you." "No, you didn't," I shook my head. "That's exactly what you wanted. You humiliated me in front of your co-workers. You treated me like a servant, like someone whose feelings meant nothing." She opened her mouth to object, but I continued. "And it's not just about that night. It's been going on for years, Pearl. Ever since your mother died, you've grown more and more distant from me. Less and less respect." I saw it, but I preferred to turn a blind eye. But not anymore. Pearl looked at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. Perhaps it was the first time in a long time that she saw not just an old man to get money from, but a man with feeling and dignity. "It's not fair," she said at last, but less confidently. "You promised that money. We were counting on it." "I promised to transfer it by the end of the month," I reminded her. "You rushed into signing the papers. It was your decision." "But you knew how important this house was to us." There was a pleading note in her voice. "Dad, please, we can fix this. I was wrong, I admit it. But don't punish me and Quentin like that. So now she's gone from anger to manipulation. Typical Pearl. When the pressure doesn't work, try pity. I'm not punishing you, Pearl, I said quietly. I've just stopped indulging in your disrespect. I respect you, she exclaimed with feigned sincerity. You're my father. Of course I respect you. No, you don't, I shook my head. Respect comes from actions, Pearl, not words. And your actions say otherwise. She was silent for a moment, biting her lip, an old gesture I remembered from her childhood when she was trying to find a way out of a difficult situation. Okay, she said finally, changing tactics. I was wrong. I behaved horribly at the corporate party. I'm sorry. Really, Daddy, I'm so sorry. Her voice sounded almost sincere, but her eyes remained cold, calculating. She played the part of the remorseful daughter, but she didn't feel any real remorse. You know what the problem is, Pearl? I said softly. You're not apologizing because you realized you hurt me. You're apologizing because you want my money. Her face twitched. The mask of sympathy began to slip. It's not true, she said, but without the same confidence. It is, and we both know it. We looked at each other across the room, father and daughter, once close, now almost strangers. I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was figuring out what strategy would work best. Daddy, she began again, softer now with sadness in her voice. I know I haven't always been the perfect daughter. The work, the stress, it's changed me. But deep down inside, I'm still the same little girl you carried on your shoulders, the one you built tree houses for. She paused, looking at me almost pleadingly. Give me a chance to make things right. Please, we can start over. Something in her words, perhaps the mention of the tree house I'd actually built for her years ago, made me hesitate for a moment. What if she really is remorseful? What if this is a chance to repair our relationship? But then I remembered the look on her face when she said those cruel words about the nursing home. I remembered the way she'd looked right through me all those years ago. And I realized it was just another manipulation. I already transferred the money, I said simply. Her eyes widened. To who? Hugo. She stood up abruptly, her face contorted with rage. Hugo? You gave my money to Hugo? It's not your money, Pearl, I said calmly. It was never yours. It's my money, and I decide who I give it to. You, she gasped with anger. How could you do this to me? Prefer this loser to your daughter? Hugo is not a loser, I said firmly. He's an honest, hard-working man, a good father, a good son. And I'm the bad daughter? She was almost screaming. Because I'm a success? Because I'm not stuck in a backwater like him? No, Pearl. You're a bad daughter because you stopped respecting your family, because you think your accomplishments give you the right to look down on others. She blushed even more, if that's possible. You're going to regret this, she said, lowering her voice to a near hiss. When Quentin and I have children, you won't see them, ever. I'll take care of it. The blow was precisely timed. She knew how much I longed for grandchildren from her. But I didn't give in. That's your right, Pearl, I said quietly. But I hope you won't use your own children as a weapon against me. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I got up to open it, leaving Pearl seething with anger in the living room. Quentin stood on the threshold with a small gym bag in his hand. Norman, he said, sorry to bother you. I forgot to pick up some things I left at your place. The blueprints and... He stopped talking as he noticed Pearl's car in the driveway. Is she here? He asked, tensing up. I nodded. We're talking. I can come back later, he offered, but I shook my head. Come on in, Quentin. You should probably tell her what you told me too. He hesitated for a second, then nodded decisively and walked into the house. When we returned to the living room, Pearl was standing at the window, her back to us. When she heard footsteps, she turned around. When she saw Quentin, she froze for a moment, then rushed toward him. Quentin, thank God you're here. You won't believe what's happened. Papa gave the money for our house to Hugo. He betrayed us. She grabbed his hand, looking at him pleadingly. "Talk to him, please. Explain how important this is to us, for our future." Quentin gently but firmly released his hand. "Pearl," he said calmly, "I know. Norman told me about his decision." She stared at him, perplexed. You agree with it?" Her voice trembled. "Yes," Quentin answered simply. "I agree." Pearl took a step back as if he had hit her. "What? But this is our home, our dream." "It was your dream, Pearl," Quentin said. "A house that shows off your status. I just wanted a place where we could be happy." She blinked again, trying to comprehend what was happening. "Quentin, what are you talking about? Why did you come here?" "To get my things," he replied, picking up his bag. "The blueprints I left behind last time, and a few other things." He paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "I'd also come to tell Norman that I was filing for divorce." There was a silence, so deep it seemed you could hear a speck of dust falling. Pearl froze, her face pale. "What?" she whispered at last. "You're joking." "It's a joke." "No, Pearl." Quentin shook his head. "It's not a joke. I'm serious." "Because of the house?" she almost shrieked. "You're leaving me because of the house?" "No." Quentin looked at her directly, without anger but with determination. "Not because of the house. Because of what you've become. Because of the way you treat people. Your father, my parents, me. With waiters at restaurants, with co-workers at work." He took a step toward her, his voice softening. "Pearl, I married a kind, intelligent, ambitious woman. But somewhere along the way you lost something important. Compassion, respect for others. I tried to turn a blind eye to it, convince myself it was temporary due to stress at work. But the way you acted at the corporate party with Norman, it opened my eyes." Pearl looked from Quentin to me and back again, as if she couldn't believe this was happening. "You two are in cahoots," she said finally. "Both of you. Against me." "No one's against you, Pearl," I said softly. "We just can't accept your behavior anymore." "Hypocrites!" She raised her voice again. "Both of you. You," she jabbed her finger at me, "have always favored Hugo. Always. And now you've found an excuse to give him the money you promised me." She turned to Quentin. "And you swore to love me for richer or poorer, for better or for worse, the first difficulty, and you run away." "It's not about money, Pearl," said Quentin tiredly. "And I'm not running away from hardship. I'm running away from a relationship that's become toxic." "Toxic?" She laughed, but there was no mirth in her laughter. "That's such a fancy word. Why don't you tell me I'm narcissistic?" "I'm not diagnosing you," Quentin shook his head. "I just know I can't be with you anymore. Not with the woman you've become." Pearl stared at him for a long moment with a mixture of hurt, anger, and disbelief. Then she looked back at me. "It's because of you. You turned him against me." "No, Pearl," I shook my head. "You did this to yourself by your own actions." She stood between us, looking at one and the other like a hunted animal. Then it was as if something in her broke, her shoulders slumped, her gaze faded. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "Just fine. You both betrayed me. Wonderful." She grabbed her purse from the couch and headed for the exit. She turned around at the door. "You're going to regret this, both of you." And she left, slamming the door so hard that a picture fell off the wall. Quentin and I stood in silence, listening to the sound of the car driving away. When it faded into the distance, Quentin sank heavily into his chair. "I didn't plan for it to happen this way," he said. "I wanted to talk to her alone, quietly." "I know," I nodded. "Life rarely goes according to plan." We talked for a while. Then I asked, "What are you going to do now?" "First, I'll stay in a hotel," he answered. "Then maybe I'll get an apartment. I need to contact a lawyer and start the divorce process." He looked at me. I was really hoping it wouldn't come to this, that Pearl would realize how she's changed and want to work on herself, on our relationship. "I'd hoped that too," I admitted. But sometimes people need to lose something important to realize its value. Quentin nodded. Maybe this will be a lesson to her, though I'm not sure she's capable of admitting her mistakes. Time will tell, I said. In the meantime, you want to stay for dinner? I have lasagna. He smiled weakly. I'd love to, Norman. 2 weeks later, my backyard was filled with laughter and joyful shouts. Walden and Iris were running around the lawn playing with the new Labrador puppy that Hugo and Doreen had finally decided to get. They had a house of their own with a spacious yard, a long-time dream come true. Hugo and I sat on the veranda watching the children play. Doreen was helping me in the kitchen preparing a barbecue, our first family barbecue of the summer. Do you think, Dad, Hugo asked, keeping his eyes on the children, will Pearl ever come to his senses? I sighed. I hadn't heard a word from my daughter in 2 weeks. I called her several times, but she hadn't answered. I don't know, son. I hope she does. But it's her choice. Hugo nodded. I hope so too. No matter what, she's my sister, and your daughter. We were silent for a moment, watching Iris try to teach the puppy to paw while Walden filmed it on his phone. By the way, Hugo said, Quentin called yesterday. Said he found an apartment not too far from here. Yeah, he mentioned it when I saw him on Thursday, I replied. He's a good guy. It's a shame about that. Do you still consider him family? Hugo asked with slight surprise. Of course, I nodded. Just because he's no longer Pearl's husband doesn't change the fact that he's a good man I respect. You've always been able to see people for who they are, Dad. Not always. I shook my head. Otherwise, I would have noticed the change in Pearl sooner. You saw what you wanted to see, Hugo said softly. We all do that to those we love. Doreen came out onto the veranda carrying a tray of drinks. The barbecue is almost ready, she said. Kids, wash your hands! Walden and Iris reluctantly broke away from the puppy and ran to the garden hose, laughing and splashing water. I watched this scene with a warmth in my heart. Yes, I had lost my daughter, at least for now, but I still had a family that loved and respected me. I had grandchildren who filled my home with laughter, and even a new friend in the form of Quentin, who promised to stop by later. The bitterness of breaking up with Pearl was still there, deep inside. But something else had settled in beside it, a calm assurance that I'd done the right thing, that I'd finally stopped letting her manipulate me out of fear of losing her love, a love I'd probably lost long ago. If Pearl ever decided to come back to admit her mistakes, I'd be willing to listen to her. Not to simply forget and forgive, but to perhaps start building a new, healthy relationship. A relationship based on mutual respect, not financial dependence. In the meantime, while I had this moment, the laughter of grandchildren, the warmth of family, the aroma of barbecue, and a summer evening full of promise. Grandpa, look! Iris shouted, running up with wet hands. Bucky has learned to give a paw. The puppy clumsily raised his front paw, looking at us expectantly. Good for you, I smiled, patting the dog on the head. You're a great teacher, Iris. I know, she smiled proudly. I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up. You can be anything you want to be, I said, hugging my granddaughter. The main thing is to stay as kind and caring as you are. How's Grandma? She asked, looking at the picture of Eleanor on the veranda table. Yes, I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. Like your grandmother. Eleanor would be pleased. Despite all the pain and disappointment associated with Pearl, our family had stuck together, and perhaps became even stronger through the ordeal. Doreen called everyone to the table. Hugo helped me up. My knees weren't what they used to be. We joined the others, and I looked at these people, my family. Not perfect with its cracks and scars, but real. In that moment, sitting around the table with my son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren, I felt peace. Not happiness. The wound of breaking up with Pearl was still too fresh for that. But peace, from the knowledge that I had finally done the right thing, that I had set boundaries that should have been set long ago. And whatever the future brought, I would face it with the dignity of a man who had finally learned to value himself.